In 2025, the world is witnessing something extraordinary.
Africa, often underestimated by the global tech community, has stepped boldly into the future with an innovation that seems straight out of science fiction. A self-charging electric vehicle capable of tackling the wild, untamed terrains of the continent. This is not just about cars. It's about rewriting the story of African innovation, about pushing boundaries where no one thought it was possible, and about defying the narrative that only the West or East could define the next era of mobility. The story begins in a workshop, not in Silicon Valley or Shenzhen, but in Harare, Zimbabwe. The sound of tools echo against concrete walls as engineers and innovators gather around a strange-looking prototype, its body raw and unpolished, but with a heart that promises limitless potential. This vehicle is no ordinary EV. It carries within it a system that harvests energy from the environment, constantly recharging itself as it moves, eliminating the dependency on charging stations that most of the world is still struggling to install. "Are you telling me this thing doesn't need a charging cable?" asked Michael, an automotive journalist visiting from London. His voice carried a mix of skepticism and fascination. He bent low, tapping the side of the car, a rugged SUV-style design built to endure the toughest roads. Beside him, Chipo, one of the lead engineers, smiled knowingly. Not a single cable. Not a single charging port. This machine is designed to live and breathe in motion. You drive, it feeds itself. You stop, it keeps building reserves. You don't depend on the grid. The car is the grid. Michael raised his eyebrows, skeptical but intrigued. That's bold. Every automaker in the world is chasing longer ranges and faster charging times, and you're saying you've skipped that entire race. "We didn't skip," Chipo replied confidently.
We redefined the rule of the race.
Why waste time playing catch-up with the old system when you can leap into a new one? Africa doesn't have time for slow progress. We need solutions that fit our realities now. This exchange reflected the deeper truth: Africa's infrastructure gap. Charging networks, fuel supply chains, even consistent electricity grids are rare luxuries in many parts of the continent. If Africa was to adopt EVs, it couldn't afford to replicate Europe's or America's approach. It needed an entirely new philosophy, something that bypassed the very problems that stalled development elsewhere. And that's where the self-charging EV came in. The test drive wasn't in a polished urban street but in the rough outskirts, where dirt roads twisted between savannas and scattered villages. Michael, still doubtful, insisted on driving. "If this thing can handle what my eyes are seeing, I'll believe you," he muttered, sliding behind the wheel. The car roared to life, not with the mechanical growl of a combustion engine, but with the silent surge of electric torque. It leapt forward, wheels gripping loose soil, climbing steep hills with power that felt endless. No dashboard warning lights about low battery, no need to plan routes around charging stations. For every mile it covered, it seemed to generate more confidence. Chipo sat beside him, her hands calmly resting on her lap. "This is more than transportation, Michael. It's liberation." Imagine the farmer in rural Kenya who can now transport goods to the market without ever worrying about fuel costs. Imagine medical supplies reaching remote villages without delays caused by empty tanks. Imagine cities breathing cleaner air because their vehicles no longer choke them with exhaust. This is what we're building. Michael slowed down, his journalistic detachment slowly eroding. "And this works in the real world? This isn't just lab magic." "We've been testing for months," Chipo said, her voice steady.
Dust, rein, heat, long distance. The wild of Africa don't forgive weakness.
"If it works here, it works anywhere." Word about the invention spread quickly, drawing attention from across the globe. In Silicon Valley, analysts debated if this was even possible. In China, tech giants sent quiet delegations to investigate. And in Africa, hope grew like wildfire. For too long, Africa had been the customer, the market, the afterthought. Now, it was the pioneer. But with success came challenges. Investors wanted control, governments wanted ownership, and global corporations eyed the idea like hawks. During one heated meeting in Johannesburg, Michael found himself again with Chipo and her team. This time, suits and ties filled the room, papers stacked high with contracts and offers. "You have to understand," said one stern European investor, "the world isn't ready to abandon charging networks. Billions have already been poured into them. If your car succeeds, it threatens an entire industry. That kind of disruption attracts enemies, not allies. Chipo leaned forward, her voice calm but unwavering. And if we do nothing, Africa waits another 50 years for technology that fits our needs. We don't have that luxury. This is not about fitting into their market. This is about solving our reality. Michael, now less an observer and more a believer, nodded.
Eurositting on something the world can't ignore.
But you're right, the fight won't just be engineering. It'll be political, economic, and cultural.
Are you ready for that?
The engineer's eyes lit with determination. We were born ready. Innovation isn't just about machines, it's about courage. Months turned into years, and by mid-2025, the vehicle was no longer a secret. Pilots rolled out across African cities and rural landscapes. Farmers loaded produce into the backs of self-charging trucks. Wildlife rangers patrolled vast reserves without fear of fuel shortages. Families took road trips without planning pit stops. And slowly, Africa's image began to change, not as a follower of technology, but as a leader. The West tried to downplay it, labeled it unproven, experimental, even impossible. Yet every time a skeptic visited Africa, they left with stories of cars that didn't die, of vehicles that kept going even in the harshest conditions. By late 2025, footage of the cars traversing deserts, climbing rocky mountains, and wading through muddy tracks went viral. In one emotional moment, an old man from a remote village in Malawi was handed the keys to the EV. He had spent decades walking miles just to sell small harvests at the nearest market. With tears streaming down his face, he whispered, "For the first time, I feel free." Michael, now writing his book about Africa's automotive revolution, reflected on the journey. "I came here thinking I'd expose a scam," he admitted during an interview. "Instead, I discovered the future. And the future didn't come from Detroit or Berlin.
It came from the heart of Africa."
By the end of the year, the world could no longer deny it. Africa's self-charging EV wasn't just real, it was transformative. And for the first time in history, the world wasn't asking what Africa could buy, but what Africa could teach. The wilds had been tamed, not by foreign technology, but by African vision. And in that vision lay not just the future of cars, but the future of an entire continent rising to claim its place on the world stage.